Hello and good evening and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of July, because it's July. And we are here to talk about the book Die, and I'm gonna have to add the title afterwards, the subtitle, Fantasy Heartbreaker, because if you try to look up Die in a database, you can't. It doesn't work.
Idiots.
It's terrible.
Anyway, that was a good idea.
And so the book is Die, Fantasy Heartbreaker, and we have Dr. Kieron Gillen here.
Yes.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. I wanted to call you Dr. Kieron Gillen because
it's funny.
Yeah, it is funny, right?
People who don't know, I got an honorary doctorate a couple of weeks ago, so I genuinely am Dr. Kieron Gillen. So I can heal you.
Yeah.
Actually, it's my first sector. I need to actually change my surname to Doom.
Yeah.
So I can actually just become, embrace my natural role.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. All right, so my first question, it's always my first question, and I think it's a really good question. But why comics? Of all the things you could be doing in the whole wide world, comics spoke to you. In fact, you had a successful career, we can say, I think, in gaming journalism, among other things. But why did you chuck it all for comics?
The thing is, a successful career in games journalism was a contradiction in terms. I say with love.
Sure.
So I did 15 years in those particular trenches. I felt I was on comics late. I always say I got into comics when I was 25. It's not quite true. Obviously I read them as a kid and I was always aware of them as culturally interesting. And I got into Alan Moore when I was 21.
Yeah.
And then it was one or two trades a year, then I fell in hard when I was 25.
Right.
And I was in the WEF within 6 months, and 6 months after that I went to my first con and wrote my first script when I came home. So it was instantly, this is an interesting medium. When I was in bands, I remember I left university and the band I was in, I went to, are we serious? Are we genuinely going to try to make this work?
Right.
And then I was like, yeah, I am. Yeah, sure, great. So I don't get a job. I kind of I work in bars. Yeah. I'm deliberately not doing something.
Yeah.
And then the guitarist goes get a job in Taunton.
Right.
It's oh, that's it. And then instantly, the second I knew I was getting a job in Taunton, I'm just going to be a writer.
Sure.
I cannot trust anybody else because I can't do a real job. It would kill me because I'm lazy. That's the kind of I work very hard to avoid having an actual job that's really a job. Out of fear.
Yeah.
Fear.
Yeah.
But the I was prose and I was writing journalism but when I rediscovered comics, I found myself back to collaboration, being a writer.
Right.
I mean, I've executed comics. I've done comics by myself, and when I was doing it on the web and just messing around. But I just like collaboration, which is one. So that allows me to work with someone, and there's a really incredibly addictive thing in a collaborative relationship of it being yours. I wrote this. I recognise this as my story, but I'm also the audience of it. It's not mine. And it's imagine you get a different version of that if you're writing on for the screen. But there's so many other people that the intensity of just me and you, we made this thing, and I see myself in it, I see something else in it, and that's magical, and that's very addictive. Power, I think power as a writer is the only point of being a writer. People often ask me why don't I go into games writing, and AAA games writing is the equivalent of do you know about texture artists? So textures are basically you cover polygons, and that's why they look like walls rather than grids. So you're basically just covering it. And most games writing is being a texture artist. You're doing a thin narrative wrapper over something that already exists.
Okay.
And there's exceptions, but the majority of games writing, I would know that's far down the pecking order. I want to actually create shit. In which case, comics gives you the flexibility to do that. You can actually, your idea is very on the page, very direct, and with a very few limits, and those kind of things. So you can do it, you can come out. So all those kind of things are actually the economic reasons why comics.
Yeah.
But the specifics of comics, it's really interesting. It's I did a book called Peter Cannon recently, and this is since I came late to comics, I'm a little bit enamoured by the kind of playfulness of comics. Okay, comics do this, that kind of stuff. So coming late, you've got that weird evangelical interest in formalism. It's still a relatively new medium. Like the fact it was kind of depressed culturally for so long means it's kind of was kept in a state of like bonsai plantness.
Sure.
And like the fact there's still room to do new work there, as opposed to the novel which is dead and has been dead for about 50 years.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right.
That's my favorite. That's my favorite troll argument.
Yeah.
Like just like why would anyone write novels of one? Yeah. You know. That's the thing. I've always also it's an underdog medium. I love underdog mediums.
Sure.
Like my life is about games, comics, pop music.
Right.
Like pop music obviously is big, but it's also not taken seriously.
Right.
So like as much as I love like novels and movies and stuff, they've kind of won.
Yeah.
You know, like so why fight on the side of the victor?
Yeah. Yeah.
So all those kind of things.
Okay.
The agility and all those things are really addictive. But the intimacy of being in a band and having an idea and putting it on the page, and in a way which is really flexible. Mm-hmm. That's very appealing to me.
Yeah. What's the first comics you remember reading?
Yeah, that's a toss-up. I mean, two things come to mind. I would have to check my calendar. Obviously, I have calendar dating back to when I was 3. My earliest holiday, my mum was Scottish, and we lived in Midlands. So my earliest holidays were to see her family in Scotland. We read the Bruins and Ur Willie. Do you know these? The Bruins and Ur Willie are kind of like Scottish comics, and I didn't realise at the time they were all done in the 1960s. So they're full of 1960s tech. So I was like a 4 or 5 year old reading this and going, I don't understand anything in this. And like, what world? And like, this entire sequence, they make glue out of. There's so many stories about making glue out of what appear to be chocolate bars, and the idea that you used to melt glue. Like I know, and I was like, what world is this from? And also, they all speak in dialect.
Right.
So it's kind of like train spotting for the under 10s. Like, so they're just kind of like that. And of course, actually, the artist of Ur Willie and the Bruins is a serious influence on Frank Whiteley. As if you look at Frank Whiteley's art and you look at the Bruins, you kind of see a lot about face structure. And obviously, there's a lot of other stuff with Frank as well. But like, all of that. So that's the first thing I remember. And I remember just sitting there and pouring through on these utterly rainy, miserable holidays and just, what the hell is this thing? And the other one I instantly remember is a Marvel reprint of a 4 comic where 4 fought the Wrecker.
Okay.
So I've always had a weird soft spot for the Wrecker.
Okay.
Because crowbar, mask, I'm into it.
Yeah.
It's like a supervillain based on what have we got round the room? It's like we can use a microphone and a chair and we'll fight you forward with it. I want to pitch that now. It's like, CB, so I've got an idea. Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
Obviously the Beano and the Dandy and that kind of stuff.
Sure. And so the Beano and Dandy, were you reading those on a fortnightly basis?
Like that kind of. They tend to be weekly basis. Like like British. As a pre-teen, what you end up doing in the UK is occasionally you got like the American comics, but they were kind of weirdly exotic because you'd never be sure they were going to arrive at the newsagent. They were like, you got a random issue if you did. And the British Marvel UK reprints are like in a 2000 AD structure, so they're weekly, and they're normally taking comics from multiple time periods. So you have like the ones like stuff like Spider-Man. No, it's like let's say the Transformers they were reprinting plus 1970s Machine Man,
right?
Plus all it was like you had 1960s X-Men plus some random 1970s strip. Plus Secret Wars. Okay. So you've got all these kind of weird. I mentioned that 4 comic. That 4 comic's a 1960s 4 comic. Yeah. So that you've got basically these Marvel stories from across those 30 years of like 20 years of Marvel. Sure. But you had no idea how they tied together. Sure. So I got my earliest memories of like the American superhero comics were these iconic. I got the characters. Yeah. I had no idea how it tied together, and which is quite fun. Yeah. But the. That's what you were going to say.
No. So my question is that exciting to you, or is that putting off to you, or
no? It's fine. That was all. That was just how we understood it. Yeah. So, we got the stuff, and it's like it was quite. And also, the first issue of Uncanny X-Men I actually read was a random issue when they were in San Francisco. Okay. Like it was. I think Nimrod is in it.
I think so.
Like, and Nimrod and like. Thingy with the arms.
Right. Yeah.
Thingy with the arms. Yeah. And I was really into it and I had no idea what was going on. Right. But that kind of like, I was willing to make that leap. And, and that actually only occurred to me when I actually started writing Uncanny X-Men. Yeah. I'm in San Francisco again. Yeah. The idea that I didn't put them in San Francisco. Right. The idea that this was actually just how I came to them. Yeah. So yeah, but as a kid, it's like these were the fundamental exoticism of American comics in the UK is part of the thing.
Sure.
Like, you know, and
when the exoticism of comics is kind of their strength, isn't it? Right?
Well, no,
like,
exactly. That was the
because as an American, I first encountered comics the same way. My first comic that I remember, I'm sure there were many first comics I read before that, but it was an issue of JLA that was a 100-page giant that had a 1940s story and a 1960s story and a 1970s story, and it was clear that, oh, there's multiple Green Lanterns. What does that mean? How? Like, that was what intrigued me more than anything else, right?
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously,
like the sense that it's a universe, right? It becomes what's important about those comics more than them being superhero comics or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like that you're able to make that leap. Because people often say, I don't know where to start, and they want to start at the beginning and go through. And like that's a completely entirely justified way to approach work. That's why, you know, the works I produce are normally closed end. Even when I'm writing in a Marvel universe, I'm trying to write a novel. But the idea of like, I'm just gonna pick up issue 47 and I'm in. Yeah. And that's also fun too. You know, there's a lot of energy. I mean, like the iconicness of like the American comics was interesting. Like the first thing that happens to any British writer or artist when they go to New York or America, full stop, is, oh no, the mud hells really do smoke. Because we presume in movies and comics that's like artistic license. Right. Like, oh no, that looks cool. But no, they're smoking. That's the thing that happens. Right. Like Twinkies. Right. We don't have Twinkies in the UK. Right. And like they're always in fucking 1980s like Marvel comics or whatever. And we're like,
they were throwing it
exactly.
At each other,
like, right? what are these Twinkies? Yeah. And like the first thing anyone does is go to America and eat a Twinkie and is disappointed. And like, but the adverts of like advert for toys you'll never have because the toys are like you can only order in America. Sure. And these kind of like, there's something weird and interesting. Yeah. Like, you know, I said I read them. I met him as a teenager. He carried on buying comics, so I occasionally borrowed stuff from him. Right. But like that, American stuff, because in Stafford there was no comic shops. That's the other thing. Like, we had to go to Birmingham, which is like the nearest big city, to get something. So I couldn't be a comic book reader, like as you would understand it where I lived. Yeah. And you know, this is actually a reason why I think a lot of British writers, unless they're from a city, tend to be lean Marvel. Because DC never did reprints in the UK. Sure. So there's an entire, like my generation of Marvel creators are infused in a way that I understand Marvel Universe in that basic iconic way. Right. In the way that I don't understand DC. I mean, the second like DC comic I ever read was like Kingdom Come. So like, you know, like I came in
not the second comic to read from the DC universe.
You know, understanding a DC comic through a deconstruction. Yeah, sure. Like, I mean, I got it though. I mean, it was entertaining, but like, it's not exactly. You know, your way in.
You know, it's really weird because I'd almost make the argument that most people's introduction to DC is through deconstruction. Almost everyone's is.
I have a theory about this. The thing is, I have a theory about this, and basically, this is my rebellion against the. Whose argument was it? Martin Abusick argument, but the you know, the idea of like, you know, the deconstruction and now a reconstructionary age, and I'm a bit like, well, no, because if the first superhero comic you read is what was termed the deconstruction. That's not deconstruction. That's just a superhero comic. So in other words, like people whose first comic was The Dark Knight Returns or something, no, they just think superheroes are different. And the idea that there is a true superhero comic, that's, you know, even like, I find that noxious because like the point of it, these are all different warp shapes. We find our way through them. That's always my thing. Is like even this comics I don't like anyone who says the word should bothers me. It's that kind of especially talking about aesthetics. Like, you know, Superman should be this. I'm like, I may agree with you. I disagree with what you're saying. Like, because like what, you know, should is instantly the sound of doors closing because you have no idea what else is possible. Like, and if you know that's I mean that's. We're going to talk about the Warren Ellis stuff later, I'm sure. But that, I'm sure, comes from my basic kind of aesthetic there. In terms of closing any door without, which you don't have to, is a problem.
I would like to think that sometimes you're aspirational about those statements.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. So in other words, Superman should always be hopeful towards the future, right? You don't want to have Superman murdering people, right?
I don't think that's interesting, but maybe someone will make it work. That's the thing. It's like I find myself finding Schneider, and I don't like those movies. But at the same time, I'm like, maybe he could have made him work. And if he, you know, that kind of like, if he made him work, that would have been a good movie.
But.
I'm not interested in seeing it.
I guess. Don't you think that there are certain ideospace constructions that are should be what they are.
I occasionally, this is going on the internet. It's actually probably a bad idea.
Right.
But you have those occasional what's your superhero hot take?
Right.
One of my superhero hot takes is there is nothing special about Superman except that he was first. As in, the idea that just being first is a power.
Okay.
As in, that means you're first in the room and you get to create the stuff around you. Whatever hero was first, we would have made up a mythology to mean, oh no, and that's why stories which basically. The fundamental nature of the DC universe that Superman is always on top is a conservative idea I despise.
I agree with that. Sure,
and that's the kind of I like Superman as a character.
Sure.
But there's a fundamental regressive, conservative, small c conservative idea built into those universes based upon the inertia of these corporate icons.
Sure.
That bugs me. And the idea of actually raising the simple fact they were first and have longer to acclimate brand equity to religion.
Oh, absolutely. But there was clearly a point, Kieron, that it was not a corporate brand, right? It was Simon & Schuster's creation, right?
True. Yeah.
And there was a core to the thing that they did, which I think is important and powerful. I mean,
it's a great character.
Yeah.
And not to take anything from their creation.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Captain Marvel was a bigger character. And until he was crushed.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, if he was not crushed, would Captain Marvel be the bigger character now?
Sure.
And would we be making up stories of why Captain Marvel, of course, this early super... You know what I mean? Humanity has an amazing ability to retrospectively justify wherever we are.
Yeah. Though I think with Captain Marvel, I would make the same argument that his basic decency is what is the character, right? So I would almost go, we have the Batman strand and the Superman strand, right? And Captain Marvel is clearly on the Superman strand. Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, these, but you can trace stuff. As people do, people trace stuff back to Superman, and you end up the ludicrous position that you talk about the Olympian gods as being superheroes, which is not how it works.
Sure.
But yeah, sorry, I'm definitely taking an argumentative position in this one.
Yeah.
What are we disagreeing about at the moment? I've lost track.
No, I don't even know that we're disagreeing.
Well,
I just, if I like anything about the metaphor of superheroes, it's the innate hopefulness of it, right? And so that's a thing that I want to support. I don't want to tear it down, even though obviously you can tear it down, and not even tearing it down, you can explore darker versions, whatever. I saw that Brightburn movie or whatever, right? That was like a dark version of Superman, and it was perfectly 100% fine, but it didn't actually have anything to say other than I'm being subversive to this trope, right? Which to me is not a thing to say. I wasn't trying to get you to say, that you had an opinion on that or one way or the other.
No, I saw in the trailer and I found myself thinking about that, especially just in a version of this conversation.
Sure.
In that, deconstruction for its own sake is pointless. I mean, Planetary is amazing. Planetary, I talk about this in the back of Die. But Planetary is great because it's a deconstruction. It's taking apart these ingredients of the superhero.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it uncovers them and it makes them new again.
Yeah.
And it's it does both of those at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's why I find that Planetary is an influential book on Die as much as you can do that. As in, you can talk about stuff and tear it apart whilst also showing, here's another way of doing it.
Sure.
And the deconstruction becomes the new struction.
Sure.
But, and that's kind of this is where it came from, the idea that there's this hard line between deconstruction and not. As in, stuff that could be deconstruction now is the new status quo, and other people play games than that. And people will play games on the Dark Knight Returns or Watchmen or whatever.
Yeah.
And these are all part of the nature of what we do as creatives. You simultaneously create something new, but you're still you're nothing but the amino acids in your body.
Yeah.
You can arrange them in interesting ways, and you can definitely make whole new things, but you're still those amino acids. That was the kind of the thing. I think what I'm trying to kick against in this what we're going here is the idea of just the purity of it, in terms of the idea there is any one underlying thing beneath it versus what could warp in the moment in time. That there might be a good time to do a darker Superman story. Sure. Now I can't tell, I don't think I wouldn't do that.
Sure.
And I couldn't tell, but maybe there is.
Sure.
And So I like to try to, I suppose saying Superman should be this. I would rather say this is bad. I would rather say this is a bad take. This is like this is a cynical and depressing take.
Yeah.
Which doesn't give me anything useful. Versus the idea was bad.
Right.
Like when the ideas are bad is not something I have a lot of time for. Except for like I don't know, fascism. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a bad idea. I agree.
Anyway, Die is available from comic shops.
All right, so let's talk about the WEF for a moment. And the WEF is, for those of you who don't know, it's called the Warren Ellis Forums. That was a forum on Delphi, and it was of the moment in the 80s. And it was an act of creation, I want to say, on everybody's part, not just Warren's part, but everybody was participating in it. We were willing into existence what we wanted the discussion of comics to be, even though it wasn't that and it couldn't be that, but we were all sort of idealistically trying to do that.
It was a bit of like the Peter Pan, it's like clap if you believe in the comic industry.
Yep.
Like if you clap and believe in a better comics industry. And it was a lot of that kind of statements of intent.
Yeah.
Bless it. I felt like we're saying that, it was a forum at Delphi. It sounds like we are ancient, like, Greeks. It's like, and people go, what's a forum?
A user group from...
Yes.
Right?
Imagine like a big Sky, a big sort of like Slack or something like that.
Yeah, but not. No, but not that. Yeah. I mean, it was very focused because Warren curated it very specifically to try and get the voices to talk about how comics could be the best thing they could be. Would you agree with that?
Warren, this is, of course, I came into comics, like I said, just 99, 2000.
Yep.
Like, late 99 it would have been. So, and like, Warren was, it's probably worth contextualising Ellis's career at this point. In 1999, Warren was having genuinely one of the golden years for comic book writers. As in, like, I think that's up with, like, Moore's 85.
Sure.
It's like, he was doing Planetary, he was doing Authority, he was doing Transmet, and he was doing Hellblazer. And his Hellblazer run is great, and that's the weak kitten of them.
Yep. By far.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like,
by far.
But like, it's really about like Authority genuinely has defined the mainstream mode of superhero comics for the last 20 years.
Yep.
As in these are genuinely definitive, enormously influential works.
Sure.
And he was doing 3 of them at once.
Yep.
And this is like the most influential writer of the time.
Yep.
He's never got an Eisner. Industry's stupid. But the most influential writer of the time was running this forum, therefore it had enormous like cachet. Like there was a force of personality there. And the WEF at its worst was a bit personality cultish. As if you weren't willing to get with the program in terms of, we're not in, we were about this.
Sure.
Like, there was a lot of genuinely straight on rejection of superhero comics. As in, almost a puritanical, thing. The book, I would say the company I always connect with, like, the WEF in that period would be, actually Oni, as in early Oni. When Oni was basically doing that kind of the quote-unquote real mainstream.
Sure.
The idea, it's like books like Queen and Country.
Sure.
Those are the kind of like, as in these are genre books, but, these are genre books. The idea of, what is, I mean, it's the classic joke, is like, what would be a mainstream, like, film is an indie comic. There's the Warren metaphor's choice was nurse novels.
Sure.
Like, imagine walking into a bookshop and like 80% of the books were about nurses. That's the comic industry.
Yeah.
And they're
sort of though.
Yeah.
Right? Like we look around, it's not actually that, right?
I mean, but back then, especially there were more comic shops that were like about superheroes.
Sure.
And that was a sort of like fiery, ideological battle, which was like, and a lot of people on that forum found it very exciting.
Yeah.
And that's right. And it was very good at like hyping new work. It was really good at like introducing, look, this is good stuff, you should try this. And for me, who knew nothing about comics, it was my liberal education. I came and I lurked and watched very carefully, and like just like
you participated quite a bit.
I eventually went in hard.
Okay.
But like I watched considerably because I'm quite cautious. It's like if I know less than someone, I try to be quiet.
Right.
Like except in interview situations, evidently.
It's all good. Yeah.
But like, and actually, my first ever thread was it was due to Watchmen. That Watchmen was, of course, the enormous success it was. Why is the 9-panel grid so rare in comics? Like the most nerdy piece of like, I remember that Charlie Chugo and Kieron. But that was where I was that very serious young man. But it was very much like it sharpened a lot of opinions. A lot of really like Fraction was on it, and Kelly Sue was on it, and Matt Stan Humphries, and lots of other people were on it.
Yep.
And that are like the kind of CBGB of it, in terms of this was like a lot of like people doing small projects and like meeting people and building from there. And most of all, the ideological idea that we could make an industry where the conversation wasn't just about those characters. And it's just like the great. I mean, in 5 years, it's all going to be different. We're going to burn down the industry, and it's going to be amazing.
Sure.
Not as in like, and it will be good because it's going to be like these are going to be books and they're popular. And this is stuff people like. And in a real way, kind of that image wave of like 2012 to 2014 was what the WEF wanted.
Yes.
That's the thing.
Very much so.
Yeah, it took us a decade.
Yeah.
But we got there.
Yeah.
So that I think that would be my kind of like, if I was doing a point in WEF, it's like a lot of people got angry on a forum, and then eventually took over the industry.
Sure, but that's the important point, that
a generation of the Americans.
And not only that you guys won, but it's interesting in a way. It feels like the way you won was by balancing your creator-owned work with the work for hire. Which I think that if you had gone back to, if I had gone to you at the beginning and gone, oh yeah, well you're going to become famous because you did Loki and Young Avengers, and then you were able to parlay that into your creator-owned work.
No, I agree. Like that's
right?
It's ludicrous.
That's like ludicrous, right? That's weird, right?
I mean, I had no aim.
Fraction's the same way. Like his career is exactly the same. Kelly Sue's career is the same way, and all of you, I'm amused. Not amused.
No, I am unamused.
Okay,
like,
all right. Well, because that seems reductive. I don't want to be reductive because it was a powerful thing that we were all doing, and it's amazing that you guys all got to you all succeeded. Not everybody was participating, but enough of you, right? It was a movement, and a movement that made a thing that is real and lasting, and you now have careers.
Yes, which seems miraculous.
From that, right? Yeah. Right? Not from anything else. Or that's the wrong way to put it. But
it was a useful crucible of thought, and like it allowed a lot of people to actually sharpen their ideas and be exposed to. As I said, it was my liberal education. I learned about comics through the WEF.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, maybe actually, I think probably one of the key things in that whole mess was. Remember Warren, like this whole thing where Warren's saying, he stopped doing superhero comics. I'll never do a superhero comic again. Was the kind of the argument.
Sure.
And then everyone else, and this is when actually Marvel had the new Marvel, and suddenly Marvel Comics got good. There was a wave of genuinely interesting books. And Warren, I remember on the forum, was saying he was aware of the irony that he was going this way and all his peers were going the other way. So like he was going creator owned only. And Grant was doing New X-Men. Mark was doing the Invisibles. Not Invisibles, Ultimates. Mark Miller's the Invisibles. That'd be my God. Wow.
That might be the greatest comic ever, actually. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Wow. I mean, I'm gonna have to stop and have a rest now.
Yeah.
But like so that was.
Sure.
But so that was the kind of the backdrop of that. Because we all did those books.
Yeah.
That was the kind of like. Yeah. But seeing the real politic of like that period was probably informative. I think the most important thing was like our generation, we learned the horror stories. Like about like you learned about the history of the industry and how creators were treated badly. Sure. And that kind of that if a company will fuck over Jack Kirby, what inevitably it'll happen to you. Sure. Too. And that's kind of like you. So our generation, we got involved with any of the big companies with our eyes open. Yeah. Like there's kind of like there was a lot of people who earlier generation had a more idealistic view of it, and versus like you go, yes, this is a lot of fun. Yeah. Yes, we're going to do good books, but we're aware of the deal. I mean, it says a lot. I often talk about in interviews the concept of emotional contraceptives, the idea that like if you take the job, this isn't my child. I'm a nanny. Sure. I will have to give this child back, and if I'm not capable of actually doing the emotional tweaks to do that, I shouldn't do the job because. And I mean, I was pretty good at that at Marvel. Like. Were you an architect? No,
you were not an architect. Okay. No, Fraction was though.
Yeah, I just dug holes.
Okay.
Right. I was a labourer in the great architect empire. What a time!
I love that. No, that's great. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about this part of the? I got two hands. Let's go to Miles in the back.
Well, first of all, I wanted to ask about your career as a games journalist, because it seems to me that like games are all about a power fantasy, and so do superhero comics as well. I'm wondering how you feel about that.
I think that's a reductive take on games. Like, I mean, a lot of mainstream games are about power fantasies, but not all games are about power fantasies. Like, there's
I'm not thinking about the Stanley Parable.
No, I get your point, but like, it's one of the things. Like, if someone said, you know, like, death doesn't matter in comics, I would say, well, death does matter in a lot of comics. You're talking about mainstream superhero comics, you know. So I've got to like bracket what you've just said because whilst I will now accept your, what you're saying and discuss that, I just had to bracket it. That's the games critic in me because I'm an idiot.
You invented games criticism now.
I did hear that. Like, so Kotaku once.
Dr. Gillen.
Yeah, when I left.
Dr. Gillen.
When I left games journalism, there's a Kotaku article that said some would say he invented games journalism. Actually, no, it was when I started working for Marvel.
Right.
And that's like, really? Kotaku, are you sure about that?
Right.
I don't think I did.
Right.
Well, I thought One Up was better.
There's a lot of good. There is some overlap in terms of like, power fantasies, but like the direct nature of gaming power fantasy and that's happening to you means there's a lot. It is one for one. What you're talking about, those games that is happening to you.
I mean, video games.
Yeah, I know what you mean. But as in, it's happening to you, but therefore that's why it's a power fantasy. Whilst of course reading like a superhero comic, like even like fairly like full-on superhero comics, there is more emotional nuance based upon that these are characters who are not you. You may be identifying, but bad things can happen to them and you're interested in it. As opposed to many video games, like if someone like insults you, you'll shoot them. That kind of like, and that wouldn't, imagine if, I don't know, Captain America started walking around just punching people who looked at him funny. Like, that wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't accept that, and that means that's the kind of difference. I said, yeah, they have elements that feed into the idea of like, well, that's a cool fantasy.
Well, they may be a US agent.
Well, they made that, but again, this is where I would come back to. I think these things are aspirational.
Like you imagine to be better. I mean,
Right, exactly.
And that's the difference between.
So Captain America would never go and punch someone because America shouldn't go punch people, even though we are, but we shouldn't be, right?
Yeah.
But we shouldn't. No, see, I'm a patriot, man. I believe in this country, and I believe that we're strong and that we're wonderful and we're great, and I like our heroes to be strong and wonderful and great. And
something like America would not go rooting through random drawers in a house to find what power-ups they could find.
Right.
That's like
exactly.
The weirdness of video games.
Yeah.
Or those sort of video games.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Link?
No, we're not. Exactly.
So, you said something that really picked my ears, that you had to make emotional adjustments in order to write for Marvel, basically. And I'm really interested in hearing like what some of those specific things are that you had to do, especially because it's a well that you do keep coming back to.
I mean, also it's fun. That's the thing. It's like
sure.
Writing for Marvel and like working the big two and writing those characters, it's absolutely a giggle as well. Like obviously it can be also heartbreaking, and full of arguments. But at the same time, like when I was writing Darth Vader, I ran down excitedly. I think, I know how Darth Vader can kill somebody. Like I woke up in the morning going, great, I've got a new murder method. And that's fun. Never take anything away from that. But like also, you could be sacked at any moment. And that's the emotional reality of it. They could say, no, that's all you wanted to do. We agreed you to do. You can't do that story.
So how
it's like, but you know that.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, that could happen. I'm okay with that happening. And that's it's like. The only work for hard jobs I haven't been okay with is when the job has changed. In other words, what I thought the job wasn't the job. But even like, especially when I did a lot of hard jobs. Like I jumped on after JMS left, I took over 4, and I knew that job involved like, okay, I've got to get all the Asgardians back from Latveria with Doctor Doom back to Broxton so they can have Siege. Got to do that in 3 issues. Also, Loki has to be trusted by the Asgardians again, despite Loki has just helped him with vivisection of Asgardian. Oh yeah, and 4 isn't involved in the plot at the moment, so I've got somehow 4 over here to Latveria to be involved in the story with his name on the title.
Sure.
That.
Sure.
And then, and that was kind of like, and I took the job knowing that was the job. And at the same time, like late Uncanny X-Men, like I was not one of the architects. And I was writing Uncanny X-Men during A versus X. So in other words, I was writing the abstract lead Uncanny X-Men book whilst not writing the crossover.
Sure.
So my job was actually kind of to dance between the raindrops, tie stuff together, like be like a supportive actor and understanding the larger narrative and seeing what an X-Men reader would like, which wasn't in the main story. That's the sort of thing I mean. In other words, like
that seems weird, right?
It was weird. It was
weird fucking job, right?
Yeah, but I was like, the thing is, I was quite good at. I mean, a lot of my jobs at Marvel. This is the weird thing about my like. I think the Ford job was the thing that made me go down that route because they saw that I could deal with really weird situations well.
Right.
And that's like, to some degree, I think that's why they gave me Darth Vader.
Right.
Because like, you don't know what, it's a new job. You don't know how Lucasfilm will be. So maybe that'd be and Kieron is good at dealing with like, when things go weird, Kieron doesn't get angry and shout at us.
Yeah.
But also like, Kieron is good at like doing a supporting book. Like, okay, Jason's here. Kieron's very good at like synchronizing with the other book and work, So like, you know what I mean? As in, I was good at a collaboration aspect, and that's kind of where I ended up at Marvel most of my work, which is fine, but that kind of comes from, just...
I meant more for you as a writer. What, like, did you train yourself to be able to keep that separation, that emotional separation, the hard way? Was there something that you were attached to? Or if you always had it, what was it that got you to that point emotionally as a writer where you knew going in from day one that an acceptable risk was that you were going to be fired from the book or that your story would be taken away from you?
A lot of just knowing the horror stories. So it's that kind of like, you're not that special, it will happen to you. So like, but that automatically creates an emotional distance. At the same time, my job is about finding ways to care about I don't do a book if I can't find a way to care intensely. That's the thing is I'm an emotionally invested writer. That's the pushing point. Like, when I talk about this, I know it sounds kind of weird. In that kind of like, on one level I'm being very cold, and the other level I'm crying over characters. But that's balancing those two is how I work. The only time I've like, Journey to Mystery is the exception. In like when Journey to Mystery was cancelled slightly early, without me knowing, I mean realising I could not get to the end of the story I wanted to tell. That was upsetting, and that was genuinely upsetting. And I was going for a war, and I was angry with what was happening, and I was also angry with myself, as in I let myself fall for this book. I thought this book was mine, and I knew it wasn't mine. I was an idiot. And then Matt Fraction, bless him, he kind of like suggested we do Everything Burns, and he suggested we merge our last 3 issues together. So we do 6-issue story, and we got epilogues. And therefore that created enough space to end my story the way I wanted to.
Sure.
And also like Matt's story as well, but like more so mine. In other words, I owe Matt forever. Like Journey to Mystery is like a book people always come back to with me.
Sure.
But the only reason anyone cares about that is Matt. Which is like I always mention this just because
that's interesting. Yeah.
Because that's Matt going. Oh no, you clearly have some. Bless him. He's a really good guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know that I could ever live like that where I had to live by somebody else's decisions.
I mean, like the funny thing is, Cry Around is just like the great joy of like all the Image books is we have complete control, and like in Wictiv we've really pushed that. Like some of the issues we've done are like explicitly, it's like you can do an issue like this, and those part of Wictiv is we're doing a 51 issue series. We want to have really weird stuff in it, and then we could do it. And the idea that this is like a call to action, and the idea when you have a stage, you can go for it. But the flip of that is the pressure on like when you're doing an indie book is just the financial one.
Sure.
As in, it's the stuff which of course is dealt with Marvel and DC and the publishers when you're working there. But they kind of like look at the sales numbers, and you've got the graph. You realize what your numbers will be.
Yeah.
And how long can this series go? And that's a different pressure.
Yeah.
And that was at least one reason why we piped Wictiv as much as we did.
Yeah.
Kind of like me and Jamie were aware that if we launch just high enough and we do them, there's a fair chance we can do a genuinely long series.
Right.
This is our best chance we ever had of doing it, and we don't want to blow it. And it was like I've been in the industry since 2006. And this was 2014, so like best part of a decade, and this was the first chance we had to really make a book land. I mean, I remember a conversation I had with another Marvel creator about that period in like that mid-late noughties when like Image books weren't having legs, and how hard it was, and how we had to fight to try to keep sales up.
Yep.
And we made it's like something like obviously like it was like a terminal disease, as in like Phonogram survived comics of 13 issues, and that kind of, we joke about this, and that's absolutely how we felt, and we were kind of, distraught's a strong word, but like, we're very aware that we were not, my generation not many people got a chance to do their 50-issue series.
Sure.
The two exceptions are Jason Aaron, and Anthony Johnston. Because the previous generation of people like Brian K. Vaughan and stuff.
Sure.
But we just didn't get to our Sandman, if you will. And then when the chances happened, we wanted it. We were held off for like maybe 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And so when we got a chance to go for it, we went for it because we knew this was probably never going to happen again.
Well, and I can think of any number of Marvel creators at the time too who were trying to do their Image books and it didn't fly, for whatever reason. I mean, Romita Jr. had that mini-series thing that he did at that time, and nobody wanted it, because the idea was, we're already in comics, and so therefore we can do a creator-owned book. It seems to me that creator-owned work has to actually have something to it other than merely being creator-owned, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously with Wick Div, we launched stuff we announced the day after Young Avengers ended. It is simpatico, whilst being a very different book, it's simpatico with Young Avengers Desires. You can imagine most Young Avengers readers liking it.
Right.
Simultaneously, it's a little older, like HBO Young Avengers, if you will. But that kind of but at the same time, we tried to, and we made it, we did the accessible pitch.
Yeah.
We really wanted it to be a hit.
Yeah.
In a way of, I feel quite crass about it. I mean, I remember feeling, when I read the first issue of Trees by Warren, and who's the artist on Trees?
Jason Howard.
Yes, Jason. I felt like oh my god, I'm so crass. I've done a cliffhanger. But at the same time, we were very much we want to, this is us trying to play Glastonbury stage. I remember seeing Pulp, who were this indie band, and they got to play Glastonbury due to a band breaking their leg. And that idea, this is our Pulp plays Glastonbury moment.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to do a book which operates like this. In the same way, talking about DJing earlier, but if you're playing for an audience, you want to play music that works for that format you're in. And Young Avengers was that kind of swaggery stadium music, I guess. That was kind of part of the point. And maybe you're right. I mean, things, maybe you're right. And maybe the idea of just doing it as people will come to us just because it's our new book.
Sure.
And you could argue that taking stuff for granted obviously is very dangerous.
Yeah.
But everything in this medium is a roll of the dice. This thing is another reason why I hyped Wick Div as hard as we did, and we did all the stuff we did, was because if I didn't do something and the book hadn't succeeded, I would say, if only I'd done that.
If only, sure.
That was the kind of, a lot of it was just my internal kind of...
But the flip is I'm being crass, right? And it's hard to be crass a lot of the time, right? I don't know. I feel like as I get older and older in my career, I have to be more and more crass. Unfortunately, which is kind of the opposite as how it should be, I think. The older you get, the more people should just trust that you've done this for a while and you know what you're talking about, and you don't have to explicitly go to what they're saying. Does that make any sense?
It's hard. I mean, yes, it does make sense.
Yeah.
But I
guess the question
variables.
is, how much more do you have to prove yourself now versus when you were young and dumb and you were so sure of yourself? Is that the right way to phrase that question?
A little bit, but it's almost I was always trying. The thing is, I'm so one of the great joys the early Phonogram reviews. Phonogram's a weird, abrasive book, and it's aggressive and deliberately tries to piss people off. But the reviews were interesting, especially the ones who hated us, because there was a general tendency in those early reviews to deliberately sound fancy when hating us. And if you read the other reviews, they were a lot more casual and chill back, and it was almost we're aware this book thinks it's clever. We have to prove that we're also clever. Right, so
sure.
And of course, that makes them look stupid.
Sure. That's the insecurity of the critic, though, right?
Exactly. But the one critic who absolutely nailed early Phonogram was Jog. And Jog nailed us. And he said you almost see the sweat streaking off its brow.
Right.
I remember reading that thing, rumbled. I said, no, Jog, you're right. How hard they were trying.
Yeah. When you were a games critic, journalist,
both,
right? But did you feel the same thing? Did you ever feel like you had some sort of pressure to prove that you were smarter than the creators of the games?
No, but I was.
Okay, stipulated.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I was a weird critic. Like, there was a bit, like, especially early on. Like, even now, it's like when I'm interviewing people, I'm very aware I'm interviewing people who are probably less experienced in journalism than I am.
Sure.
Like, there's some people who aren't. There's other people I'm very aware that this might be your first ever interview.
Sure.
You seem really nervous.
Sure.
And like, okay, I'm going to help you through this.
Yeah.
Like, and that kind of, I'm a very easy interview. As in, I try to talk to people. Like, I want emotional connection with people. I'm not going to give you a one-word answer.
Right.
I won't give you all the words,
right?
But I won't give you a one. That kind of
right.
like. So there's a lot of like. I feel very protective about young journalists and
yeah.
critics in the industry, especially in comics where there's no money.
Yeah.
Like that's I'm very defensive about them.
Yeah.
Not defensive, protective.
Protective, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like when it was like, but that comes from a games critic, and
yeah.
it was also where like, especially early in Phonogram. When we desperate for coverage, I was like, this is shameful. But I was aware that by being nice to certain critics and playing to their ego,
right.
I could increase the review score.
Sure.
And I
sure.
did.
Sure.
There was at least one critic who went from a 2 out to 4 to 4 to 4. And like, cause it's like, when the band, it's like, thanks,
right.
thanks for writing about us.
Yeah.
I did, it was like,
yeah.
and it was genuine and sincere.
Yeah.
But I was also aware that it's one of the things in life, and I'm obsessed by this, occasionally the right thing to do is also the effective thing to do.
Yeah.
Like people get the idea of like good and effective are opposites
yep.
always. No.
Yep.
For me, almost all my business life's about the idea that no, good is also effective.
Right.
And there was at least some of that in my early Whitdiv. And of course, I'm aware of like having been a journalist, I know how tentative and nervous some people are and like how fragile people can be.
Sure.
I know. Does that answer the question?
I think that answers the question fully. Yeah. Daniel, I think you had a question you wanted to ask before I go on.
I was actually, I had never been familiar with the Warren Ellis Forum stuff, so there's been a phrase that I've been trying to mentally process for a few minutes. You said that a mainstream movie would be an indie comic. And that's a really weird thing to say, because now an average movie is about Spider-Man.
That's true. That is a generational thing, definitely.
Yeah. How did people respond to this new world where if you were saying, like, wouldn't it be absurd if every Hollywood movie was about superheroes?
But that was the truth. That was the truth, Daniel, at that moment in time, right?
Yeah.
There was not, the superheroes were not looked upon as a valid medium.
There's a bit of that, but it's also, it's not even they weren't a valid medium, it's just more the fact that the suffocating nature of the superhero medium in the comics medium, which is nothing about being the mainstream medium. Just specifically, it was hard to make a book that was not, Criminal is an indie book. Criminal is just a fucking crime. You know what I mean? Like, that's the, all those like Queen and Country, which is basically a hardcore, like a Bourne-esque spy thriller. That's not. If that was a movie, that would not be an indie movie. But it is an indie comic, and that's.
But today it would, wouldn't it? Like, I haven't seen a movie like Criminal in a while.
Today.
Yeah.
Right. But so the other
how do people respond?
The other part of the conversation, right, is what the narrative of the comics industry was. So the narrative of the comics industry was that Marvel and DC superheroes were mainstream. And yet I think we all knew that the average person walking down the street, if you wanted to start talking to them about Spider-Man, would go, what the fuck are you talking about, buddy? But if you want to talk about the crime comics or any
books, might be a better metaphor.
In general, right? We could talk to them about Persepolis or Mouse or things that they don't want to hear about superhero bullshit.
I also like this is one of my bugbears circa actually the WEF. As you say, like obviously the cultural landscape has changed. And it will change again. But I used to, like, people say don't wear a Superman t-shirt. And like every person I knew in a nightclub wore a Superman t-shirt. Because Superman, people weren't wearing a Superman t-shirt because they were like comic readers. It's because Superman's Superman.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a culture, that kind of like
and
there was for me, I was a little bugged about the slight defensiveness about comic culture in terms of like that kind of like afraid of being punched almost, doesn't that slight
You know what I would say actually?
I
I think might be that if you saw someone in a club with a band's t-shirt, you immediately would go, that person likes that music.
True. And
I can have a conversation with them about that on that level, right? But if someone's wearing a Superman t-shirt, I don't know what their engagement is.
That's what I mean. It's like when that conversation was happening back like circa like 2000. The assumption was anyone wearing that assumption they are looking at all Superman t-shirts as band t-shirts. And Superman t-shirts aren't band t-shirts. They're Superman t-shirts.
They're Superman t-shirts. Yeah. Superman has always been bigger than any of us.
Yeah.
Even though we don't want to think that it's actually
Yeah.
true, that we think that we're more important than Superman.
Yeah. He's 6'7". He's really big.
Love it. Seth.
Is it good for comics that superhero movies, and specifically Marvel superhero movies, have become mainstream?
Good's a loaded word. Like, it's like, you can definitely, it's the sort of word that's very hard to unpack. Like, is it good in this way? And then what are the costs? What are the gains? The argument is like, I remember watching, I don't want to say that. When I watched the second Matrix movie, and it was an opening night in like a really good theatre in LA, and obviously everyone's really up. I was watching the action sequences and thinking, and this is like, I'm into comics now, I'm trying to write comics. And I was watching the action sequences and thinking, what's the point of me doing an action sequence in a comic? It's, I have to if pop culture is now doing action sequences like this, why the hell would I spend pages trying to do a comic action sequence? I should spend my time on something else.
Yep.
And that's the thing. I think that might be the thing that might hurt people. As in, if you basically, because there's some people who say they're comic fans, and what they actually mean, they're superhero fans. And if they can actually get the superhero itch, like in the rest of pop culture, they're not in comics. That for me is the quote unquote danger, and that reduces the money for people like these fine retailers. That's my thing. That's my. If I was going to choose something, that's what I would say. But really, that's just speculation. Who knows?
Yeah, I'll push back on that a little bit. I'm not sure that there are very many superhero fans. I think there's Marvel Universe fans.
Yeah.
And I think there's DC Universe fans, but I don't think that they care about superheroes per se, right?
Yeah, that's what I meant actually. I was wrong.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, yeah. So, because I know that Bill Jemas is about to come out with his new thing, and it's a new superhero universe, and I'm like, every retailer I know is like, nobody wants that. Nobody wants a new superhero universe. That's not what they're interested. They don't like that. They like the Marvel universe. That's a different thing in really fundamental ways. I saw a hand in the back.
Yeah.
Actually, right here in the front.
But the flip of that is, like, God knows, there's enough like Journey to Mystery readers who got into it through the Lokis. That kind of, so there's definitely people say that there's no new readers. I've definitely got readers through that. So like, this is what I mean. It's like, how do those two things balance out?
Right.
And we won't know until it's like in hindsight.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't buy comics though. Those people who are the movie fans who like superheroes do not come in and buy the comic version.
Yeah, but some of them get like there's enough like Journey to Mystery and Young Avengers fans who I've got who've come in and they've got as in, I know my audience is weird.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm very aware. Like when me and Jamie, like, we just get different cues to people.
Yeah.
Like, we just get more women.
Sure.
Like, we get more people. We get more queer people.
Sure.
Like, we just like our cue does not look like several of our mates' cues.
Yeah.
So like, we're very aware that our perspective is different because the audience we hopefully speak to are different.
Yeah.
So it's quite hard for us to generalise like that.
Yeah.
I guess.
Hello?
Yes, I would like to question your intentions. So, here's
All my intentions are bad.
I have a theory that we're at a unique period in social development where creation is no longer every human's innate characteristic. We are all by nature artists, we are all by nature storytellers, but right now we're being told that if you aren't great at it, just don't bother. There are people who are really good at this, so why are you even trying? And I feel, and this is just my interpretation, but I feel like when you tell a story, you're actually holding out your hand to share how that story is being told so that other people can look at that and go, hey, I want to do that too. It's kind of like the Velvet Underground. They sold, 200 copies of their record originally, but everybody started a band. And I feel like there is this concept of this is a story that is precious and it is mine and no one else can share it. And then there's a story of this story is mine and is precious. Your story is also precious. So is that just my reading into it, or do you do that deliberately?
Yes. No.
Yes.
Yes. No. Joke. No.
Do a Mueller. Just end it there.
Yeah, no, joking is like not even joking aside. Yes, like that. I don't need to say anything else. That is what we do. Like literally, there is. I mean, the come with me nonsense. Like the take on me moment. Like it's yes, but yes. There's a lot about I was like I've got this working class background. I'm not somebody when I actually speak to people in schools. When I speak to people in schools, it's very much like be aware that this is something you can do. Like I remember the time when I was I was earning money professionally as a writer before I could realise I could think about I was earning money as a writer before I realised I could think about writing as a career. The idea wasn't even in my head because my background was such that no one from Stafford writes. And I remember actually when I first heard of the first writer called Storm Constantine, who were from Stafford, that moment of like, well, okay, someone from this place could do that thing. That kind of, and then you tick, 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 tick. That. So much of like that is like the leap of like, this is what I've done. This is intensely personal to me, but like maybe it's for you. And like I used to be obviously my zine kid background. Like what I loved about zines was kind of it's like the proto-internet of it all, but the idea that you could speak out and you speak your truth. And to us, social media kind of killed that. The idea of you speaking your truth is awful if someone can speak back. Because at the point like here's an object, that kind of like here's a statement. I feel I have to make a statement, and it maybe not be perfect, but I feel better that it exists. And then if someone can actually just jump on it, that's actually takes away the joy of it. And that's what a zine was. Here's a thing I've made, and it's wonderful, and I've put it in the world, and I've stapled it and put it together. And I definitely I used to think around 97 was like everyone should make a zine. Like at the same time, I used to review zines in my zine, and I was brutal. But the point is, part of my art was like slagging people off. But at the same time, I think I'm very glad you made that zine. I just hate it. That's right, and very, very hot, and I think it's good for you. That was always part of my cynical like that era of me. But the great, yes, 100%. Like I can't say any more without spoiling stories.
Yeah.
Speak to me in like a few months' time.
All right. So I want to turn the conversation a little bit to Die itself. And here it is. It's a terrific book. Yay. That's spontaneous applause. I love spontaneous applause. That's the best kind of applause. Not just because you have the back matter, so I know where it came from and I know what you're thinking about it. Can we talk a little bit about sort of the pitch process of you come up with an idea and then how you turn that into an actual thing, right? Because I think that's the thing that most people struggle with in terms of creativity, right? Is I have an idea, but how do I make the idea a thing?
So I'm trying to actually work out what that means. Basically, I can work out. Okay, I'll walk through the practicalities of like how Die worked. In the me and Stephanie, we met working on Journey to Mystery. Like she did all the covers. She did the final issue of Journey to Mystery. I had no idea until that issue that she did issues. So we did this issue, which is the one which everyone goes crazy for because it makes everyone cry. But like at that point, it was like, okay, we should probably do a book together. And I can't remember the moment I sort of floated at her. But it was like, I don't know, there should be a 70 Hands book. It was certainly before we did Angela together.
What was the difference between working with her and working with a different work-for-hire person?
It was just like, basically done that issue and it was like, okay, this was something special. Okay. And like, okay, this is if we've done something special like this, we should try it, see if we can do it again.
So she surpassed what you thought? Like, I
know what you mean. Basically, like the joy about, not the joy, work-for-hire is interesting because like there's lots of really good, to go back to the band metaphor. Yeah. There's really great artists I love, and we never quite gelled. You know what I mean? Like we got parts of it, and you know it worked, but it wasn't really work. Like it wasn't what it should be. And then you hit somebody who completely gets it. Right. And I mean, like issue 14 of Uncanny X-Men, the Dustin Weaver issue, which is all like Mr. Sinister, underground Victorian stuff. Like the whole issue is a more parody than a homage of Notes from Underground. So it's all a Dostoevsky riff. Obviously, what the readers want. You know, Dostoevsky. But like, and he gets it, and it's just this magnificent thing. It's like that, and that issue made me kind of upset because it should be this good all the time. But you know what I mean? Like, occasionally something just kind of like clicks, and there's magic there. Okay. I mean, even like, and occasionally it's just like intellectual. Like all of Journey to Mystery kind of comes from that issue of Siege Loki I did with Jamie.
Sure.
And that was kind of like, instead of doing like a classical 4 book, I was doing Loki as lead, and it was all about Loki making deals, being a bit sleazy, and that kind of like, oh, this is fun. You know, that kind of like, we're backstage, we're kind of like sitting with a glass of wine, surfing it up. You know, and like, you know, you realize, oh no, there's something else there.
Right.
And that's that moment with Stephanie says, oh no, she's getting, you know, Stephanie's not like Jamie, and she's not a mechanical, like, rhythm-based storyteller. And not you know, Stephanie's much more impressionistic and like leans into the emotions. So that issue is all about these like really powerful felt emotions, and also she's like she's very good at rendering a fantasy world.
Right.
And so the idea between that and Angela, I think maybe around just before Angela started, I was thinking about Pacifics. I realised that the world needed a fantasy world drawn by Stephanie Hans. That's like before what the world was, and there was actually like. I was working on one pitch for her. In fact, I wrote the synopsis, sent it to her, and never went any further with it. And then I had another idea which was lying around, and I was working on that. And I got quite big in the world development on it before abandoning it, because I had the idea for Die, which is just so much better. Or rather, was so much more urgent.
Okay, wait, so let me back up just a little bit. So you come up with this other idea that you think she would be suited for. How do you build an idea like that? How do you build it as a pitch? Right? Are you thinking of a specific publisher? Or how do you envision it, and how do you pitch it? Does that question make sense?
It's a bit. It's one of the situations where like I'm in a different situation. Having done Wictiv, in terms of really big, intense personal work, well, I want complete control, and the complete control is important because, like, you know, with an image book, I can upload a PDF and I'll print it.
Right.
In terms of like I can control every line on the page.
Right.
Like, and you've got to be involved in a lot more, which is hard. But like for a certain kind of book, that kind of control is necessary. Like stuff like when we do all those Wictiv issues where we break the format and do something stupid. That like there's no other publisher would let us do what Wictiv does because they're not arranged to do it. So I knew it would be image. I mean, you know, there's lots of other reasons for image as well, but that kind of like. If I'm doing a big personal work in like the darker side, it's probably going to be image. And a lot of it's like I'm getting to a place where I just want to basically message Eric and say, I've got this idea.
Stevenson.
Yes, Eric Stevenson, and say this is what I want
Publisher
to do.
of image. Yeah.
So like this is probably not what. I mean, originally when I was pitching like for Phonogram, it was like a formal pitch. Like just with Wictiv, I wrote a formal pitch. I probably didn't have to do it. You know, I didn't have to do a formal pitch. I suspect at that point, but I want to do it anyway because I like being polite. With like Die, I wrote a relatively long mail. I described the high concept. It was like, here's the high concept where. I pretty much got it memorised, but I'll spare you. You know, that kind of like, in 1991, 6 children sat down to play a role-playing game. They disappeared. 2 years later, 5 of them appeared. They were incapable of saying where they'd been or where the missing child was. Everyone thought it was just lucky. They'd managed to escape. What awful horror that befell them. Now in the year is 2018. These now 40-something adults are about to discover that no one really escapes. Die is a logical connection between the 1980s D&D cartoon and Stephen King's It.
And the last sentence is where... Yeah.
And that kind of like, you know, and then I talk about like, okay, this is the team, this is how much money we need, you know, as in what the advance is.
Right.
When we're thinking about release, that kind of stuff. It's like, it's just kind of the basics. And there it goes.
Okay. Did you when you were the thing you were working with Stephanie before you actually turned it into Die? Did you get to that stage? You didn't get to that stage.
No, that was much more like I was
thinking this maybe. What do you think?
No, it wasn't. No, I never talked to Eric just because I want when I take something to a publisher, it's like I think.
So you're talking to Stephanie, but not Eric.
Yeah, exactly. I kind of like.
I'm just trying.
I think like,
clear,
you know, she's doing her stuff and like, especially with that because I knew that. Following Wictiv, this was my new project after Wictiv. So like, you have like one magic coin. Like you've had one hit indie series, and you get to spend that. Yeah. And like, so whatever comes out, like, if here's a throwaway series, like you know, which is kind of a giggle, but you know, not the work. You know, spend that coin. So I was kind of like, you know, I wanted to make sure it's the you know whatever we're following with like would be work. And
so the thing you pitch first. how did you know it was not the coin to spend?
Oh no, I didn't actually pitch it. So I stressed.
Well, so
but
that you discussed first.
No, basically it was just that when I had the idea for Die, it was better.
Right.
As in, like, okay, this is a niche. Okay, the actual problem with that work was I was actually on a. Some people might have heard me say this. I was on a panel with Marjorie Lowe, and she was talking about how difficult it was to develop Monstrous. Like, it was like, she was working on it for like a period of time and couldn't quite get the point. And she realised, I don't really have a lead character. I'm trying to tell this story, and I've got all this world building, but I don't have a lens to see it through. And the way I paraphrased that down was, I have my Middle Earth, I don't have a Frodo. And if you don't have a Frodo, your Middle Earth is pointless.
Sure.
With this world I'd been built, which had a really good high concept and an interesting world building. I didn't have any lens, and that kind of I had no way of entering this world, and that kind of made me immediately realise the problem. I mean, it's like one thing. It's like, okay, I could have the pitch. Okay, I've got this idea for this awesome world called Middle Earth, and okay, a group of people bring the last mystic artifact to a place where it's forged beneath the eye of the Dark Lord himself. That's a pitch. That's not a that's
sure.
not and a lot of my story ideas are at that level. Like, as in, I know the core, what makes it interesting without knowing the viewpoint.
Okay.
And the viewpoint is what you build next.
Right.
With Die.
But the viewpoint is actually the thing that makes it what it is, right? Like, not
exactly
like the plot doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
Exactly. But like with Wictive, it was like gods every 90 years, death for 2 years. This is about death and art.
Sure.
That's my core idea, and then I
Sure.
start casting the gods.
Sure.
And who is the leak?
Sure.
So I always start with a novum of idea, and then cast it, and that's how it gets to be a pitch. And with Die, it was like I instantly went. I had that idea. Actually, I think it was the same day as Marjorie that realization, or the next day anyway. And so it's like, okay, the idea is this is the device comparing teenage dream, these teenage fantasies with adult realities. By comparing the two, we perform an examination of these characters and allow them to actually understand the relationship between fantasy and reality. That's the core intellectual underpinning of Die.
Sure.
And then, of course, the reason why I immediately delved into it, I wrote in the back matter the whole kind of, oh no, how much does fantasy hurt me? How much is my love? Did I fall into a fantasy world at the age of 16? How much did that destroy me? In other words, that's Soul. Soul. Immediately had a character. This is the antagonist. He is somebody who is literally the worst possible portrait of myself, Peter Pan, a serial killer. And that was there instantly. And then I think I immediately thought of Ash. Ash had a different name originally, but but that second you start to have characters and concepts, then you've got a story, and that's why it was instantly more interesting. Because the previous story had a really good, an interesting concept and some high-fluting ideas, but in terms of emotionally speaking, Die was I'm going to talk about being an adult versus being a child, and fantasies you used to have and what you have in reality.
Yeah.
And that is that's a much more that's just better.
Sure.
So when I'd done that, it was okay, that's what I will develop into a pitch.
Where was Stephanie involved in that part of the encapsulation, though? Right? Because you're right; those are very good thoughts to have as a writer and themes to do, but where did you bring a collaborator into that? I mean,
a little basically the way. God bless Stephanie. Me and Jamie work I write shit, and I write a lot, and I give it to Jamie, and then we worry about execution.
Yeah.
Jamie, and execution.
Does he fix your problems?
Yeah, that's not right. Execution is okay. What works? What we can do on the page.
Okay.
Chrissy fixes my problems. But that's it. And execution, of course, is so much what Wictive is about. With Die, I wanted to do a weirder job. I wanted to do a kind of weirder, looser piece of fiction than Wictive. So I developed a lot, and I throw Stephanie stuff, and then Stephanie throws back a lot. As in, Stephanie just I always use the metaphor of the ocean for Stephanie. It's like collaborating with this kind of enormous, energetic, powerful thing. It's it can be tranquil, it can be stormy, and it's throwing ideas everywhere. Stephanie is as opposed to Jamie, where it's all about execution, and he's very happy for me to do the ideas. Stephanie gets it all in, and then we synthesize. There's major characters in Die who've changed significantly. I mean, Dominic Ash being in the real world, that the sensitive metalhead. That was her idea. I was a sensitive metalhead, and it would have been too autobiographical for me to do that. But she was talking about the idea, when people talk about metalheads in like pop culture, it's always it's the kind of Bill and Ted, it's the Wayne's World, that kind of like,
Sure.
or totally the satanic metalhead. And the idea of like, just that sensitive guy who paints Iron Maiden on his art folder. That's like, there's a lot of that dude. Or and that kind of like, and I, when Stephanie said that, I was like, no, that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Let's do that because I have not seen that in fiction before.
Yeah.
And like Izzy, Izzy being an adopted Korean girl. Like and that's based upon it's inspired by one of her friends, and like and that creates a different energy. And there's other elements which she threw in, and I then metabolized into it. So like it was. At the same time, like, I'm doing this enormous scaffolding of like intellectual nonsense because I'm doing all this research.
Sure.
So basically, we got a yes quite early from Eric because why wouldn't you?
You were in the position.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And Eric is very kind and
Yep.
supportive.
Yep. But you were in the position. I mean, let's at the end of the day, let's be realistic.
Yes. So that was like there was a lot of research, and building and
Yeah.
like writing big documents no one else reads.
Yep.
And then eventually write a script, and that was like I have a weird ritual that I send my collaborator a script on about 12:01 on January the 1st. Like Wickdiv 1 was sent to Jamie on January the 1st, 12:01. Ludicrous 1 was sent to David Lafuente on. That didn't turn out well. But like there's another story there.
Yep.
On the 12:01 January, Wickdiv 18. As in when Jamie came back after the gap,
Yep.
January the 1st, and Die 1 was sent on also January the 1st. And then Stephanie just starts work. And obviously the first issue takes a long time.
Sure.
Because you kind of like, artists are quite skittish about approaching stuff.
Sure.
Like doing design work and thinking around it and finishing other jobs.
Yeah. What is that blank page like? Because it's the one part of creation that I've never been able to get a good response. Not a good response, right? Right? But I've never actually understood the response necessarily. Like, you've got a blinking cursor there, right? Yeah?
Yeah, you just like
You just flail at it. Okay.
Yeah, honestly, like there's people who worry. I am very much believing in the concept of editing, and that I write quickly. My problem is procrastination. Like I'm never afraid of the cursor, but like, and when I actually sit down and manage to concentrate, it comes out very quickly.
Yeah.
And I don't edit, and then I come back later and I edit. And even especially now, my method is like. I've actually done a newsletter about this a few weeks ago, as in like I showed how a hypothetical draft of a script would turn up. If you go to my writer notes tag on my Tumblr, you'll find these examples. And like a hypothetical script might start with just the dialogue with some actions that like blah blah blah, blah blah blah, blah blah blah. Character X punches character Y, blah blah blah. And then I would like the next draft is put some panel numbers in, like maybe character names. So just like turn it into more like a page. The next draft would be, I've got 7 panels on this page. How can we merge it?
Right.
And then I would like add more details, and that would turn into like because like when you're seeing a script, I need to write it all to see it because I have there's writers who don't have the visual imagination, but I can imagine a panel, and when it's something too tricky, I'll draw it to try to work out.
That was I was going to ask.
Yeah, I don't do that as much. I get the pen and paper and the craft works out if something is really hard. Like in the Wickdiv issues when it's all graphs, grids, and like they've clearly got beat structures, and like I will get them out and draw panels and move stuff around and work out. When it gets really hard, turn to craft. But like more basic stuff, it's like, can I, person here, person over here, room to speak over here, next panel, punching in the face.
Right.
That's not. That sort of stuff I can handle.
How much of it is in your script, and how much of it do you just trust your collaborator?
Almost all of it's in the script, or at least like what needs to be in the script. And I said, and you build up in like things. Sorry, passes. A 3D printer is a useful metaphor. As in, like you build up like the layers of it. But so much is also the artist you're working with, and also the book. Like Jamie and I have a shorthand, and we do a lot of jokes. Jamie's an internal writer. As in, Jamie wants to know everything. There's artists who I've worked with who are great, but they just want, character smiles. And what Jamie, the character smiles because they know that in 20 issues' time they're going to betray them.
Right.
That because that's the reason we don't do many Wickdiv script excerpts because you know,
because you'd give away the whole
exactly
yeah.
like, you know, or we say like, you know, like everyone's read Wick Dip, they know the opening scene has multiple meanings, and that's all in the original script. So like, you know, we knew that going forward. But Stephanie is interesting because obviously on some level we're making a fantasy world, and I know Stephanie's going to make up a load of stuff because Stephanie will always add extra. That's the point. Stephanie will add an extra robot. No, great. Can I add a sad dead robot to this panel? I was like, yeah, sure. That's great. You know, that's great. You know, that's the job is because you want a Stephanie Hand's fantasy world. But at the same time, in my scripts, it took me a while to actually learn it. So I give a lot of detail. I said, okay, let's talk about the entire social structure of the glass town.
Right.
You know, and like all this stuff. You know, but then I put the bottom too long, didn't read. You know, we need to see the glass town has 3 towers, and each one has a face on.
Right.
Or like something like that. As in other words,
Sure. This is the important thing.
This is if you don't do this, the story breaks.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah,
And that's the kind of like Stephanie. Like, actually, you know, you want to keep the fluidity of like the improvisation with Stephanie, but also still having the make the story fucking work. Yeah. Which is that's another way of working. And that's like you saw like why comics. And I said earlier about the joy of being in a band and collaboration.
Yeah.
It's a bit like that.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that, you know, how are we going to work together?
Yeah.
What is our energy here?
Yeah.
To be like involved for a second.
How do you think of space and time in comics though? It like do you approach it formally in terms of 9 panels means bump 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 and 6 panels means bump 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 or you know whatever. Yeah, that was a really
no.
shitty
I know what you mean. But it's intuitive. I mean, there's a lot of intuitive knowledge based upon anyone's read the Wick Dip notes know I repeatedly drop in the sentence space equals meaning.
Right.
In that kind of like the modern comic book reader in the Anglophile tradition has been learnt the idea that that the bigger something is on a page, the more important it is.
Yeah.
They couldn't get the idea that like one panel and 9. I mean, actually, God bless Tom King, he's kind of overturning this. But like, you know, it's the Brian K. Vaughan. Or like the moment when if somebody realised they've been betrayed, you do a full page splash. You know, and Kirkman does this too. Miller does this. You know, these are like, you know, and it's robust techniques because it's like you see the character close up, and it's one of these. And I was kind of resistant.
This is really interesting because no one's ever talked about this out loud. I don't think that I've spoken to.
Oh no, yeah. This is stuff I've said. I mean, this is like pure craft. In that, I remember like chatting to Fraction when we're doing Everything Burns.
Yeah.
And the bit where Loki, like, spoilers for Journey to Mystery, like, pretends to, as a fake heel turn. And the whole thing is, of course I've been lying to it. I'm Loki. Why does the fire burn? All that kind of stuff. And I originally wrote that as part of a 7-panel page. And Fraction put it, no one's going to believe it's really a heel turn unless you get a splash. And he was right. You know, so if you see Journey to Mystery, the moment where, like, Loki's got the fire behind him. And it's true because if it's a big moment, you've written it as a big moment.
Right.
Unless your entire story is based on a different rhythm. Like, that's much more of a main, you know, if you're doing the mainstream rhythm.
What's the natural rhythm of a comics page?
Depends on the comic.
Is it 9? Is it
like
ideally, like, is it a 9? Is it a 6? I mean, I feel like there's a number there where the rhythm becomes.
I tell you, I was going to write an essay about this recently. I would strongly advise anyone newly writing Anglophone comics to force themselves to only write 5-panel pages. Okay. Go less than 5-panel, great. Don't go more. Because almost every artist you work with can handle a 5-panel page. 5-panel is one of the more flexible. You know, it's flexible. Like a 6-panel page has much fewer combinations than a 5-panel page for layouts. The artist will enjoy doing the 5-panel pages and all that kind of stuff. To be honest, like. You know, 6-panel is 7 is really a weird one. Yeah. Like you take. Well,
7's weird. That's
I like 7 because 7 is modified. I write a lot of 7s, but my 7s are modified 8s. Like my classic one is the phonogram layout of 8-panel grid, first row merged, next to an 8-panel grid of the last row merged. Right. So you get a 2-page scene with like. I've completely got maths, so 14 beats. Yeah. And you get an establishing shot, and you get a large shot at the end to imply meaning. You know, that's the classic phonogram rhythm. Sure. And like the phonogram didn't tend to use splash. Phonogram used a 2-panel page, which was 9-panel grid, the first 6 panels merged to make main image. Last one being a row, which is a reaction shot. So instead of just doing a single image, it's like, here's an image, and we now see our characters respond to it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, you'll see, if you actually go through Wikdiv, you'll see those rhythms appear quite regularly. I like those. I mean, to us, I don't want to use them ever again.
Yeah.
Like, I think actually Peter Cannon was me deciding to stop doing that.
Yeah.
Especially with Wikdiv, it's like, it's a me and Jamie rhythm.
Yeah.
And I don't think I should do them again.
This. I mean, I really love that. This is
Numbers and graphs.
Yeah. No, it's because comics are math in a way.
Yeah, it's like,
right?
I was on a panel with Kid Koala, and I've got the animator he works with. He's also a dancer. Anyway, like, this panel, and we were talking about, they were talking about, like, he was talking his music, he was talking animation, and they were just talking math. And my moment was, oh no, this is it as well. Like, you got art and beauty. So much about being a comic writer and a comic artist is just it's the beat of it.
Yeah.
And that kind of, what is information? How many words to a panel?
Yeah.
How many words to a page?
Yeah.
How can we create the speed? If we have too many words in this panel, the rhythm breaks. And this is the thing that you're saying about the number of panels.
Yeah.
It's also the amount of information in a panel.
Sure.
I mean my.
Oh yeah.
That's the kind of like, okay, there's a dance issue of issue 8 of Wikdiv, which was an issue I'm really proud of. I don't think it's as good as I wanted it to be, but we tried. And it's basically, it's a lot of the 1, 2, 3, 4, and we basically double the length of the issue. Don't start me. Like, the worst thing about Wikdiv was not worst thing, but occasionally by me cheating with how page structure works. Like, classic, it's like, take a 6-panel grid, make half those panels black.
Yeah.
You've got 2 pages, the same amount of work as 1 page. Therefore, I can create 2 pages, and Jamie doesn't have to kill himself. But I don't know. So instead of doing 20 pages of comics, I do 21.
Yeah.
Which gives the readers a bigger issue.
Sure.
That was kind of the Wikdiv is all about the hacks.
Yeah.
And something like issue 8 was about a complete hack. So basically, the whole issue was like about 36 pages, but like half the issue was half panel pages. And I thought, and it just wasn't like, it was more work for like Matt, and it almost killed him.
Yeah.
And it was more, and it cost me money.
Yeah.
So that kind of like, the fact we increased the size of the issue, like I took an extra, like, I said, anytime we make the issues too long, I pay for it. Because it's my stupid idea. So it cost me $2,000 for that. Like, those black pages in that issue 36, that cost me like the best part of $2,000, just because I thought it was artistically worthwhile.
Yeah.
Why would I do that?
Yeah.
Art.
All right.
You can have the anger of, obviously, God bless readers, who of course I feel ripped off because of these pages. But there's still 20 issues of page, and it's longer, and it's actually, you can imagine the frustration when it's cost me literal money to make this artistic statement. I misunderstood.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the economics of comics, creator-owned versus work for hire, how you make money as a creator, because I get confused sometimes, right? There are certainly books that are being done that are self-created books that they make no money at all, and I'm sure you've had a couple of books that were like that where you made no money at all. And then other books blow past that so much that
it's got like. Do you want to narrow that down? I mean, obviously, this is. I mean, I've done. Me talking about like a lot of what I do, especially like with Wikdiv.
Sure.
It's about demystification.
Yeah.
And there's like there's a couple of times I've talked about like how much abstract money an indie comic makes, and my kind of basic one was anything over 12k as an indie book is a really big success.
Right.
If you're doing 12k as an image book, it's probably more money than Image will pay you. Probably more money than Marvel or DC would pay you unless you're genuinely a very big name.
Right.
Like 12k is really genuinely good money.
Right.
I'd have to look up it. This one, that's a very like loose thing.
Yep.
And that's of course in issue, not including trades, not including digital.
Yeah. Now, is this you have given your creative partner, the artist, in advance? Or is this you're paying them?
Both. I mean, like the way that this is the way we run. I mean, lots of people run the books in a different way. When I'm doing a book entirely, if I get an advance, what we generally do is the artist gets all the advance, which is partially because I'm doing other stuff as well, so I can like also earn money. But that gives them as much to be able to eat, but also that, and I count the advance as a payment. So in other words, they always get the advance more money than me, and then all of the money is split 50-50.
Yep.
So that's kind of like if it does very well and we make lots of money, like everyone's got lots of money, it doesn't matter. And if we're only like marginal, the artist is actually always getting more. So if like
Sure.
As in the difference of the advance is enough to basically make it feel a bit more like the writer artist split.
In the cases where your books have failed, the artist has made the money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And plus, and in the long run, you do like with Phonogram. I often said like, I made no money in Phonogram until like 2010.
Yeah.
Because the way that deal worked was like we had no advance then. The deal was basically money's 50-50. Jamie gets all the money until Jamie earns up to X amount of money, and then I earn X amount of money.
Right. Understand. Yeah.
And like, actually, I got $400 for issue 3 because issue 3 was the one we didn't reprint, and therefore we just got the money for the first printing. So he earned up that X amount of money for the first phonogram, and then I earned X amount of money for that phonogram like years later. Like,
Right.
and then now we split it 50-50. So all that money is abstractly earned out over time. So like, we've earned in the long term.
In the long term, sure.
It's done 100% fine.
Sure.
Like in the short term, it's unsustainable. But it was still, Jamie got at least. For me, in indie comics, a lot of the writer's job is to protect the artist, just
Yes.
because the physical amount of work is. I mean, people talk about like who does more work in pure physicality. Like anything that distracts the artist from drawing pages is a waste of their effort. So like before I earned any money, a lot of my stuff was like trying to make sure stuff was like, don't look at this, as in that kind of. I always get a bit worried about. I hear about writers who aren't protective about their artists.
Sure.
It just feels like utterly abusive. I mean, it's one of those things that actually it's Alan Moore quote. It's basically you just need to give your artist pages, even if it's just one page.
Yep.
It's that kind of like I remember an Ivan Brandon idea that if you cannot give your artist pages, you should pay their rent.
Yeah, because they're not working. They're literally waiting for you to produce work so that they can do their work.
Yeah. And it's like kind of like, and that's always in my head. And like the idea of actually letting someone down.
Yeah.
That's always like deeply motivating for
Yeah.
me. I've stepped off. Do you want to like refocus my?
Sure. So I guess one of the things that I'm asking is the ability for a creator to do a creator-owned work and have it pay. So you're in a rare place where you're a successful creator doing successful creator-owned work. Most people don't get to that place.
Yeah, I mean the things worth noting is like actually Uber launched pretty well. Actually, like as in genuinely Uber launched well.
From Avatar,
Yeah,
not the app on your
Yeah,
phone.
yeah. It's like how dare they ruin the reputation of a comic?
Was that a creator-owned work?
It was. It's worth high actually.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but like, I don't think I launched a successful work for like creator own book. That's properly successful until Wick did. And that was the kind of like that was the sort of a Rubicon moment. And from then it's like kind of been sort of trying to work out how that works.
Yeah.
And like, so I've lost the actual thread again. It's like, it's tricky. As in, like,
Yeah, I mean, the thing...
I'm not quite sure. Basically,
Right,
what
yeah,
I'm trying to say is
yeah.
like, oh no, when that happened, it's the pure mathematic of it in terms of like, do you want me to talk about the actual mathematic of like, can you do a 50 issues?
Sure, maybe, but it's as much, I'm as much worried about the people who are coming behind you who think that math works in a certain way, and that maybe math doesn't work in a certain way because of advantages that you've had. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, like,
And-
basically, like, what my generation's, if we could speak very broadly,
very broadly.
our tactic was, we do create our own work
Yep.
because that's how you get in and make your name.
Right.
And because that's what you want to do.
Right.
That work is appealing enough and that the, Marvel or DC say,
You can do some work for us, yeah.
come do small character, then come do
Yep.
medium character, then
Yep.
come do big character.
Yep.
And then you can, like, that you have a...
And then you flip it, and then you turn it back into your own creator-owned work.
Yes.
Right? That's
That-
the program.
If you're going to talk about that
Yeah.
kind of era, that's
Yeah.
the classical route.
Yeah.
And it does require an awareness of like, I mean, it's not everyone did that,
Yeah.
like, there's definitely like creators who did not take that route.
Absolutely.
But all like one way or the other, and there's like, there's always the Kirkman argument that Kirkman believes that, going to work at Marvel only hurt his career.
Sure.
Which is like, he has numbers to back it up, which
Sure.
is interesting. Then you got someone like Alice Cott, and Alice Cott was interesting in terms of like him like doing a series of image books, which like he did it until like image book, and then he'll cancel it the second it's not profitable, and then do another image book launch, which launches at a higher level.
Sure.
And that's a kind of like a weird accumulator model.
Sure. It's harder though because he didn't build his reputation. I would argue it hurt his later books.
I think I'd say
From the retailer point of view,
I was gonna say, his early image, like his early image.
Yep.
I would say, as I'm trying to say, an alternate tactic, as in
Yep.
early Alice Cott tactic rather than late Alice Cott tactic was the model. And of course, these models are all temporary.
Sure.
And like different things
Sure.
working in time. So
Sure. And as soon as you figure out the model breaks at that point.
I'm not
That's the
saying that
problem.
like, but it's interesting that there's not been many people trying that move that we did recently.
Right.
Like, I remember just thinking like it was like when Tom King and Walter did the Vision. My take was, if I was there, I would instantly have done an image book.
Right.
You know,
Right.
I would have immediately done an image book, and
Yeah.
that's obviously not what Tom wanted
Sure.
to do, and not
Sure.
I would never judge,
Sure.
tell them what to do, frankly.
Sure. But I see creators thinking that Marvel and DC are their path to their future, and that strikes me as maybe not perhaps the exactly wisest thing.
It's like the balance between like as I said earlier, it's like knowing what the job is.
Yeah.
In fact, like, okay, how can I use Marvel to the cynical take on the writers? How can I use Marvel as much as Marvel will be using me?
Right.
Marvel are hiring you as a writer or an artist to rejuvenate the brand value of their
Yeah.
long-standing IP.
Sure. Sure.
And you are using them to
Sure.
earn some money
Yeah.
and practice writing comics.
Right.
And increase your status as a writer.
Right.
That's the status of those two.
Sure.
And like, who?
But there's a
How
point
the
where you
phrase-
have more value than they do, right? Like you're bringing more value to that equation as a creator.
You hope you are,
Yeah.
unless you aren't. And the thing is, I think.
Oh well, sure. Yeah. of course.
I think some that those are kind of like such fluid
Sure.
dynamics.
Sure.
Understanding
Sure.
it
Sure.
who in
Sure.
different space, different times, and I think that's the reason why I'm deliberately not wanting to say a hard and fast rule.
Yeah.
But there is that. Anybody who's not aware that is the deal when they go into Marvel, for a very sore disappointment. It's
Yeah.
one of those situations where like I am 100% pro fanfic. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think all forms of fan expression are like, and there's lots of really useful
Mm-hmm.
things that comes from fanfic. But I get a little frustrated when I see some writers saying that work for hire is fanfic. Because it's not. Because
Right.
fanfic is more artistically valid.
Right. Yeah.
I know, that's a slight joke, but it's just it's a different job.
Yeah.
And like the idea that going to Marvel as being paid for your fanfic, it's a completely false expectation
Sure.
of what the job is. It's like painting your own house is different than being an interior decorator.
Sure.
Like if you work at Marvel, you're being like just the process of the job.
Sure.
And the thing, if you strip fanfic away from the social and the creative dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
you're not really explaining fanfic, and that's what worries me. And that's the kind of and this is the reason why I say this stuff, which is probably unwise for me to say. I loved working for Marvel, but you really need to have a realistic understanding of what you're doing.
Sure.
I guess. And in my case, it's like I burnt out in the Marvel universe. And I stopped before doing it. And that kind of like the second I realised I'm burning out, I stopped doing it because I don't want to do bad comics.
Did they stop offering you work?
No,
or-
I just thought, like they still wanted to give me work.
Okay.
Like, and it was like kind of like, no, I'm not enjoying it. And for me, it was like, when I started doing the Star Wars work, it's like, oh no, this is so much more fun. Mm-hmm. I need to stop this other work because I'm very aware. And with Star
Okay.
Wars, it's like, I really enjoy my Star Wars work, but I could sense like, yeah, I think I'm reaching the end of things to say about Star Wars. I'll stop now.
Sure.
Which is
Well, that even seems like more of a work for hire situation than Marvel. Or
It's
is
a
that
different job.
Do you think of that way? I mean,
I actually I found well, yes, to some degree, but no in others. Like phrase this. It was easier to be told no, you can't do a story because there's a multi-million movie means that you can't do it versus another writer's doing it.
right? Sure. I get that. Yeah.
There's something
Yep.
like I said.
Yep.
You said
Yep.
earlier about if you know what the job is, it's
Yep.
easier.
Yep.
You know what the job is.
Yep.
'Cause,
Yep.
Yeah.
You
But yeah, sorry, these stopping and burning it, and like, so me, it's like, no, I'm done with work for now. Mainly because, as I said earlier, I just want to make new myths at the moment.
Yeah.
And that kind of that's what Die's about. That's what Monster Future's about. That's what Wicked was about.
Yeah.
And that kind of like, well, if people are willing to pay me basically the same thing to make my own ideas, why would I do Whip High right now?
Okay.
And the only reason is because it might be fun.
Yeah, sure. And are you making a living from comics? Solely?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually.
Yeah. Without, you don't have to ascribe.
No. It's like it's one of those situations that I obviously I come from a genuinely working class background, not proper, not poor,
Yeah.
but like working class.
Yeah.
I've worked building sites, but like I am financially successful beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
My wildest dream is like having a cornetto.
Yeah.
But like
Yeah. And so therefore, is that money coming more from your work for hire work or from your creator-owned work?
I would have to actually do a genuine breakdown of the work. I would say at least 2/3, even like in the best years of Darth Vader, when Darth Vader was of course the big book it was.
Yep.
It was my work for hire.
Like 100,000 copies.
Yeah, 100,000 plus a lot of trades.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of genuine royalties coming from them.
Yeah.
Even then, Wicked was like 2/3 of my money.
Wow. Okay.
And
Okay.
and you can imagine like that is. And there's a reason why I tend to try to buy people drinks, in that kind of like the sheer guilt. As in, I think image deal's very good. In that kind of like you keep a lot of the money.
Yeah.
And like kind of like so in other words, that's that that kind of if you're selling 12K, you're doing as much as you probably Marvel would pay you in single issues. But then of course you're also selling trades.
Sure.
I mean the classic like dynamic of we're talking about this backstage, but if a book launches here. Like the second issue is like between 1/3 and 50% down.
Yep.
And the third issue is probably 10% down. And then it's like
20 probably. Even.
And then like it's let's say 2% on average.
Yep.
And so if you basically if you hit your numbers for issue 3, you've got a pretty good guess in a normal book what your sales would be in issue 40. So you can genuinely and the art of doing a creator-owned ongoing is can that number when that number goes down beneath a certain level. Will the trades have increased to a level to actually pay you enough to carry on? So it's okay if you're selling like 8-7K an issue, or even less, if
you're selling
your trade
3.5 or 4 or 5,000 trades.
Yeah. As in like basically those that and that's I mean like Wickdiv sells more trades in its open. Well, Wickdiv's initial orders of trades are higher than the single issue orders.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, and
I mean, I believe that, but
and like those.
Yeah.
That is basically
the curves,
the cold hard maths. Isn't okay.
Yep.
I know when I need the trades to be selling for.
Yep.
And that's the basic finances of the industry.
Yeah.
Or like the finances of the creator-owned industry.
Yeah.
And if you're the wrong side of the graph, you have to start thinking, like, okay, what can I do instead?
Right.
And that's the thing about that's why we try to that's the reason why it's so important to launch as high as possible. There's so few books ever go up. I mean, actually, ironically, Die genuinely has actually got issue 6 has just gone up like 5K or something, which is like.
Yeah. Well, Die's a weird situation where the first issue has gone through 6 printings now.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often.
Exactly.
So,
I was showing Stephanie, who's never done this before.
Yeah.
I keep having to tell her like, this isn't normal. Like, this is not how it normally works. But even like when we came with 34K in the first issue. Like I could do the math into it was like okay, if our second issue is this, we're probably okay. That kind of like as in and that's the game. That's the game cry around, isn't it? You can look at numbers and take a calm like okay, this is where we are.
Yeah. All right. Do we have any questions in the audience about Die specifically? Miles has got one, please. Oh, you're not Miles. I'm sorry. I thought it was Miles, and go ahead. Go.
Books, what's up?
Please.
So a running theme throughout a lot of your works are dichotomies between everyday identities and identities very outside context. We see this in Wickdiv with the teens and the gods, in Young Avengers with teens and superhero personae. In Die, this becomes even more literal than before, with people stepping into this fantasy world and these fantasy characters. And yet, they are, in a similar vein as they have been in the past, they're not fundamentally changing their character. Their personality in no way changes. They are taking on, not outwardly, they're taking on this archetypal role, they're taking on the character class. this is also a role-playing game. In a lot of role-playing games, you are playing a role of a different character, not just a different class. In the development of Die, was there ever talk of character, of the persona taking on character as opposed to just class? Of what were they role-playing as, and was that ever part of the conversation? And if so, how does that factor into the storytelling and the characters?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, as you say, Wick Div is a book about people playing roles and getting caught up and swept in their roles. And Die is less about that. Die is more... And you're also right, the fact that I tend to have a binary understanding. I'm somebody who has a Manichean... however, Die's dichotomies of such meant that I never really seriously considered people deliberately acting differently in the other world. The small there's a few exceptions to that, which are Chuck and Ash. Like Chuck and Ash, I'm just checking they are the exceptions. Yeah, Chuck and Ash are the main exceptions. As in Chuck has Chuck has a lingering doubt whether this is real, therefore he can act with greater freedom than he would consider in the real world. And Ash also, what's the line Ash used? It gave me so many permissions. And that is not necessarily about being someone else. That's about being in a different context and being able to act in different ways. And basically be able to speak in like different parts of yourself. So I was much more interested in actually the contextual issue. Like Wick Div is about how can I be someone else, and Die is about how would I be elsewhere. That was pretty coherent.
Yeah, that was pretty coherent. Yeah. I like that.
Excellent question. Well synthesized.
Yeah. Another? Yes, no? Oh, please.
I have a question about color. Like, I'm new to your work, and like this is the first book that I read of yours. But what struck me more than anything, like I love the writing and the ideas in it, but the color really was dazzling. Like every panel had its own scheme, and I'm curious how much of that was like written in, and how much of that was collaborative, and like
You cannot. Like, this is a Stephanie Hans collaboration. Sorry. Why am I apologising? No, I'm so British. You're talking about Stephanie Hans being an ocean. It's kind of like that. As in, basically, I leave a lot of space for Stephanie Hans to tear it up. There's at least a reason why I Die's a lot more caption heavy than Wick Div is, because like I want Stephanie to have space to go and play, whilst I can take more of the narrative weight. That kind of like that's the dance of it. But especially in colour, Stephanie's very interesting in how she works. Like, I suppose I occasionally say some things, but not in any real way. Stephanie works in black and white. She paints most of the issue in black and white, kind of except where she put bits of colour in. And then she goes back and plays with the colour, pushes it up and down, adds weird stuff, takes away weird stuff. Like I remember an artist friend of mine, I was showing various in progress versions of Stephanie's covers, and he presumed I thought the last one was finished. And Stephanie's, I said it's much more like and the line I said, when is the sky finished? And that's Stephanie, as in that she'll carry on tweaking and playing with an image until it goes away to try to get more of an aesthetic effect. The only that's said earlier the fantasy universe is created by Stephanie Hans. That's part of it in terms of how she the kind of the impressionistic, the kind of the Titian-esque beauty of what she brings to the page and the intensity of emotion. You don't get in the way of that. The only time I kind of step in is kind of later, and it's much more about we can't see what's going on here. It's all kind of clarity. It's clarity. As in, we probably need to tweak this. This character's skin color is a bit weird here. Those kind of things. But they're much more like clarity notes rather than art notes. Because you don't do a book with Stephanie Hans without wanting to do a book with Stephanie Hans, which is that's the point of the exercise. I was just saying, it's so much of working with an artist is trying to find a way to make them look amazing, and all my kind of I remember several people said on Wick Div, I'm coasting, I'm just riding on Jamie's coattails. Yes, that's the entire point of Wick Div.
Sure.
The point of it's a showcase for Jamie, and that's same with Young Avengers, and Die is a showcase for Stephanie, and a Peter Cannon was a showcase for Casper in a different way. Yeah. It's all about how can the artist look amazing, and because if the artist looks great, it's a great comic. You know, that kind of like how you can best show what they do.
Her black and white interstitials between chapters are just fucking amazing. I mean, they're just so nice and almost better than the color work in a way.
They're different though, completely different.
Completely different. Yeah.
The thing about like I said it's the wildness. I was like, it's like I want to do interstitials. Mm-hmm. And there's like the cover, the alt cover for issue 2. The reprint cover for issue 2. We just got a mail for Image saying, we want to go back to press on Friday. You know, can we have a tweet? Can we have a cover for like tomorrow? And she stayed up all night and just did that cover.
Right.
And I was like, no, Stephanie, no. But that thing is like, Stephanie is. That's it. I return to the seat. Is that Stephanie likes to do, like, Stephanie is a creature that she wants to do what she wants to do, and she'll do it.
Yeah.
And that's great. Like, and that gives her so much fierce energy.
Yeah.
And occasionally, like, there are times when I go, we can't do that for X, Y, and Z reason. Mm-hmm. And she go, because she knows I've done this before, so it's useful. But there's other times where she goes to something and it's like, it's so above and beyond. Like, who else would do a bunch of interstitials for the sake of it?
Yeah.
It's like, no, this is her first trade. She wanted it to be the most it could be.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, that's a brilliant idea. And then we brainstormed up some, she had some herself. And then we brainstormed some extras ones.
Right.
And then, I think my small edition was the one Chuck posing with the sort of the Ghetto Blaster, but I add a cable because obviously he won't have one with the battery. It's the idea he's just like posing stupidly with one. So that there's also it comes back because so many details in her work that I pick up on. There's that wonderful one of Izzy and with her diary, which of course is. Her diary is a loaded thing in the book, but the little key, so that 1990s girl's diary vibe.
Right.
And I'm going to use, like, keys are now an important piece of imagery in Izzy's story.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of, like, the fluid, like, Die is much more fluid place than Wickdiv is.
Sure.
Like, Wickdiv is, like, the Daft Punk machinery.
Right.
Like, Die is much more like Godspeed You Black Emperor, or something like that.
I like that.
Metaphor.
I like that. We're at 2 hours, which really means we should probably shut this down because it's at 2 hours and it's a Wednesday night. I would love to entertain a last question from the audience if there is one. Go ahead. Go ahead. Do it.
So a lot of your books also tend to create communities around.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, folks. Listen, I have a skewed perspective. Die takes that, again, gives a tool for doing that in the form of the RPG. And as we have already seen, bringing people together on the Discord for it and elsewhere. Did you have that in mind as you were creating the RPG?
A bit.
People together.
I mean, like with Wickdiv, at least part of it was like, we deliberately tried to make a mythology that was addictive or mimetic. Like, there were lots of like, this is something you can imagine. I mean, like, especially when we deconstruct it eventually, and we deconstruct the concept of these mythic elements. But at the same time, like, oh no, that's addictive. If any time I click my fingers, I'm thinking about Wickdiv. Like, and the icons and how we arrange the page, and like the 90 years. Like, why 90 years? Well, a variety of in-story reasons why 90 years, but mainly because no one else does 90 years. So in other words, we can, if you said every 100 years, that's standard. We could own 90 years in your intellect.
Sure, yeah.
So that was like the kind of the cold, hard thinking of how can we build a unique mythology.
Right.
Versus like Die, and that's like, no, that's, and of course at the same time Wickdiv is also, this is your story, and like, you encouraging people to think about themselves as gods, even if that's a loaded thing in Wickdiv. And also like encourage people to create. So all those things are kind of like inside Wickdiv. And in Die, I mean, the point of the Die RPG, it allows you to recapitulate a version of the Die first trade. In other words, for me, there's something fundamentally quite, punk rock about RPGs. As in, you're forming a band, you're doing something in a small group, and between your choices of what your rules are, quote unquote, you get to create something. And like, Die leans into that. As an RPG, it's very much like tries to create that kind of community. As in, okay, Die is a mythology, but there's the basic story of, okay, these things will drag you into another world, mess with you, probably tempt you, and then you have to kill your friends to go home. And that is it's half between like a weird, awful moral fable and a reality TV show. Like, that's the thing about Die, it's like, it's got those elements. That's something you can imagine watching on TV if TV standards were different.
Yeah. Thank God they're not.
Yeah, exactly. And then of course, I can't go there. But the further you go, the more true that is, and that that's kind of the point. And these, I mean, we sort of mentioned this in the RPG that die is in the comic. There's 20 regions, and these regions include infinite other regions.
Right.
The idea, literally, all human imaginations inside this place, inside of this infinite fractured realms of like pocket dimensions, and that includes everything you've ever fought, and all your own fantasies, and all your own individual games of die. So like by playing die, you're part of die explicitly, because. And being the game it is, that it puts quotation marks around you being part of it. Mm-hmm. And okay, what are you complicit in? And that shit's interesting to me.
Yeah.
So like, I've said this before in many different places, but like, my work and like with my collaborators tends to people say, is it deconstruct? Are you basically satirising celebrity, or are you like celebrating celebrity with Wictive? And in kind of like Die, it's like, oh, you're very anti-fantasy, and it's not, in the case of Wictive, it's not. We're just trying to do a portrait of like celebrity and artists in the widest sense, and the fact that most tend to be one or the other means that the fact that we're trying to do something a bit more three-dimensional sticks out. And with Die, it's like most books about fantasy are basically entirely apologies for it, in that kind of like. Oh, nothing's ever wrong with it. It's all great. Ready Player One was good. Like these big lies. And like Die like just takes. Maybe we should talk about some downsides. And it doesn't mean the good sides aren't there.
Sure.
But as grown-ups, we're allowed to have a more complicated idea about fantasy. So like a lot of what I do is that kind of like, let's have a nuanced discussion about the things we love, both positively and negatively, and do that honestly and
That's a perfect place to end it, I think, right? Like that. You just tied it up in a bow. Yeah. So the book was Die, Fantasy Heartbreaker. I loved this. The staff loved this. You all love this. Woo! Kieron, dude, thank you, man.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, but thank you for making comics that we can talk about. Thank you for
having... I can talk about.
Thank you for having something that we can... It matters. It's not bullshit. So, if you haven't read this, go out and read it. It's a fantastic book that is everything that comics should be, I think. So, yes, Die. Next month...
Also inexpensive.
Also, it's
$10.
$9.99. It's really fucking cheap. Actually, we'll talk about that later. Next month, Jaime Hernandez is going to be here for Tanta. This is going to be great. We're having Jaime on the 21st of August. And then in between that, for the Kids Club, I know most of you don't care about the Kids Club, but this one actually you might care about. On Sunday, August 18th, we've got Cheshire Crossing, which is Alice and Wendy and Dorothy, and it's not them having sex with one another like Alan Moore did. It's actually a much more, kind of great, awesome story. It's written by Andy Weir, who wrote The Martian, and Sarah Anderson, who does Sarah's Scribbles, which many of you like those comics. So this is a really good book, and I would really like many of you adults to come out for this meeting on August 18th at 11 a.m. That's where I am, my friends, and I want to thank all of you for coming out. I want to thank Kieron especially for coming out and talking to us. And that was the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club for the month of July. We'll see you next month, guys. Oh, and the Beat. Let's not forget the Beat. The Beat is our sponsor, www.comicsbeat.com. It's my plug. You've got to go there for your comics news. Okay? Very good. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month.